My prayer for you this year is going to be that during the year, God nudges you. That during the year, you're going to see that one, single mom. You're going to see that one struggling family. You're going to see that one group of kids. You're going to see that one guy in your office. You're going to see that one executive in your office. You're going to see that one group of kids. You're going to see that one age group. You're going to see that one children's home. You're going to see that one person struggling physically. You're going to see that one person, that one individual, that one category, and God's going to nudge you, and God's going to say, that's your one. Now, I want you to do for that one what you wish you could do for everyone. And don't use the excuse that since I can't do it for everybody, I'm going to do it for nobody. Now I want to give you 3 tips as you apply this, and I want to tell you a story. 3 tips. Tip number 1, go deep rather than wide. Go deep rather than wide. In other words, if you have a passion for high school kids or middle school kids, because when you were in high school and middle school, your life was a disaster, and you just have a burden for middle school and high school kids, then what you need to do is find you a little bitty group of high school or middle kids and go deep with them. Don't just have a general concern about high school and middle school kids. You need to get you a group and go deep with them. Don't just be concerned about the plight of people who are poor. You need to find a person or two that are poor, and you need to go deep with them. In other words, and our tendency is to go wide, not deep. And the reason is because wide is easier. It's just easier. Wide is, I'm going to give you $10 and give you $100 and give you $15. I'm going to pray with you once. I'm going to pray with you once. I'm going to pray with you once. I'm going to be wide. I'm going to feel good about myself, but I'm not going to really do any good. To do for one what you wish you could do for everyone means you've got to go deep rather than wide. That's where the difference is made. Number 2, you got to go long-term rather than short-term. In other words, this is a big time commitment. You go long-term rather than short-term. That is when God nudges you, and it's not just a category anymore. It's a face. It's that mom and her son, or that mom and her daughter. It's that struggling couple. You can't do marriage counseling for everybody. You're not even a marriage counselor. In fact, your marriage isn't even all that hot, but you got a burden for this couple. You go deep, you go long. And third, you go time, not just money. Time, not just money. Now, this is hard for us Americans because we're rich. You are rich. You have change in your ashtray, okay? That's how much money you have. You keep money in a trash can, okay? That's how rich you are, okay? And us rich Americans, and this isn't bad, we love to give $100 to everything. And if you think of my world, we do these Global X trips where we send people on short-term missions. Do you know how many requests I get at home for short-term missions? I get one for all of them. And if there's 20 kids going in the same trip, I get something from all 20 kids, times however many trips we do. And I love giving 20, in the old days, I'd say $300. Then there'd be 8 more. I'm like, oh, can't keep doing that. So, if you got there last, we just threw yours away. It's been finally, I thought, okay, I got to come up with a better system. So I'm all for, giving as much money broadly, as you can. But I'm telling you what, don't use the money excuse to keep from investing your time. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Go time, not just money. And I'm not trying to tell you where to give your money. I'm just saying find the one group, the one person, the one issue, the one need, the one organization, the one kid, the one couple, the one guy, the one struggling marriage, the one whatever it is. And make a commitment to go deep, to go long, to go time. And of course, you'll go money. But it's easier for us I've had people tell me, Andy, do I have to come to the fundraiser? Can't I just write a check? It's just the way we think. But here's what I'm telling you. As long as you minister, as long as you give of yourself only in that way, you miss an incredible opportunity. So here's my story. In 1986 or 87, that's the part I'm not sure about. Somewhere in 1986, 87, 20-something years ago. I was working for my dad. I was single. I was doing student ministry downtown at my dad's Baptist church. And sometimes I would preach for him on Sunday night. The church was down on Peachtree Street. Some of you remember that. And because we were on Peachtree Street, we were very accessible to street people, okay? A church is the only, you need to know this, a church, the reason churches attract wacko people sometimes, a church is the only place you can get into a large congregation for free. Every place else you have to buy a ticket. But a church is the only place you can get into a gathering for free. So sometimes we just attract interesting people. Okay, sometimes we hire them. So anyway, just kidding. So one Sunday night, I preached for my dad, and what would happen is we'd have an invitation. We're a Baptist church. So at the end of every service, no matter what the sermon was about, you could come forward and join the church or get your needs met, or we'd pray for you, or you could become a Christian. We always did that. So on Sunday night, typically, we'd have one or two people from the street who had just wandered in, sat on the back row. They would come forward, and I'm not making fun, but if you get calloused after a while, they wanted to become a Christian, rededicate their life. They'd be whatever we wanted them to do, they would do, as long as we'd feed them and put them up for the night. They were wide open. They loved Jesus. They loved us. We'd just help me, okay? This was, and we were equipped for that. We tried to do what we could for homeless people. So one Sunday night, and again, you get a little callous because here comes another person and you smell them before you see them. And it's just, but we're downtown, but that's okay. We were trying to figure it out. So one Sunday night I preached a sermon. I'm headed back and there was a lady, way overweight. She'd been on the street. You could just not pretty sight at all. Looked like she was about 60. Turned out she was 40. She was waiting for me at my dad's office door where I was going back after the service. And she was standing there and she said, "Preacher?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Yeah." And I thought, money, what. She said, "Do you really believe what you just preached?" And I said, "Yeah." And that night I had preached about forgiveness and being set free of bitterness and God setting you free and all these wonderful things that we as Christians believe. She said, "Do you really believe that?" I said, "Yeah, I do." She said, "Well, I need to talk to you about that." Of course, I'm thinking, I got to get home to my wife I actually wasn't married. I don't know where I was going. I need to, I had somewhere to go, okay? I may have said that. I don't know. I got to go. I'm busy, So I said, but, I'm like, okay, let's talk. So we sat down for a minute. Her name was Jane. What I didn't know was that was the beginning of a relationship that would last over 20 years. Her name was Jane McCall. And as I listened to Jane, something in me, sometimes you just get a nudge. I can't explain it. I thought, okay. And I didn't think of it in these terms, but essentially, okay, maybe I can do for this one. I know I can't do for all these people and for everyone. My roommate at the time was Rick Holliday, who's been on our staff from the very, very beginning, our business administrator, and does all our, just oversees basically everything that has to do with the business side of our church to this day. He was single as well. And I introduced Jane to Rick. And so we kind of took Jane on. She sort of became our mascot. Now, she was a street person. She was a drug addict. She was on a methadone program, but she was also on anything else she'd get her hands on. She wouldn't tell us where she lived. We decided to get her into rehab. And during my time with Jane, in fact, I thought about writing a book, Life with Jane. I learned about Medicare, Medicaid. I went to every rehab place. We spent hundreds that became thousands of dollars in and out of jobs. It went on and on and on. And she just was trying so hard, and we were trying so hard, and we didn't know what we were doing. And I'm sure we did it all wrong, and it was just a mess. And she would lie to us, and then she would disappear, then she'd show back up. In fact, she told me one time, she said, "Andy, do you know how to know when an addict is lying?" I said, "How do you know?" She said, "Whenever their lips are moving." She's a drug addict. So anyway, I became way more street smart. I got married during this time, and Sandra met Jane, and Jane just sort of became part of our little entourage as she struggled, and it was horrible. And I'm making light of it, and I got to tell the story quick. But it was. I remember one time we finally got her a job. And it wasn't a great job, but she couldn't really do anything, and she was just so unstable. And we got her a job, and we found these two college kids who had this house, and they were going to let her stay in one of the rooms for free, which didn't look great, but we needed a place for Jane to stay close to MARTA Line so she could get to work. So anyway, she called me. She'd only had this job like 3 or 4 weeks. She called me. She said, "Well, Andy, I had to quit my job today." I said, "What?" I mean, it was so hard to help her. "What? You quit?" "Yeah." I said, "Why?" And she said, and this is how we talked back then. She said, "I have AIDS." I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, I tested positive for AIDS. I'm HIV positive." I'm like, "Oh." I said, "Well, why'd you quit your job?" "Well, I knew if they found out they were going to fire me, so I went ahead and quit. And I told the guys that you set me up with that I was moving out because I don't want to affect them." I'm like, "Oh, no." So, "Well, let's go to a clinic, get you tested." And so then she disappears for a couple of weeks. Okay, this is just how it went. Then she called me up. Now, there's no cell phones back then, okay? We had car phones. Remember those? Car phones, bag phones, And then some people had those cell phones. It was like the two-handed thing, You could use it as a weapon, So she calls me up. She said, Andy, I gotta meet with you. So we met. Okay, I lied. Okay, I lied about what? I lied about having AIDS. I'm like, wait. You lied about being HIV positive? Yes. Okay, who would lie? Okay, who would make that up? You lied about being HIV? She says, yeah. She said, I knew, because what happened is I'm using again, and I didn't want to tell you I'm using again because you'd be so disappointed, so I made up the story, and that's why I had to quit my job and move out, but I'm back on the street and I'm using again. I'm like, well, honestly, I'm relieved, okay? So anyway, this went on for years, not daily, but weekly, monthly. This went on and on for years. Now, when you have a Jane in your life, you can only do for one, okay? You can't have 5 or 6 of these, But we decided we're going long, we're going deep, we're going time, we're going money. And throughout my years with Jane, we would tell her, finally there was a group of us that knew Jane. I would say to her, Jane, here's what I know is going to happen. If you'll let him, God is going to redeem your pain. She had run away from home. She grew up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Some tough things happened there. She left there, came to Atlanta, hit the streets, had been on the street for years. I said, if you'll let God, he'll redeem all this. He'll use all this. And she's like, how in the world? I said, I don't know how, but you've got to get clean. You got to stay clean. You got to forgive. And if you do, God is going to redeem all this junk. And the other thing that's going to happen, Jane, one day God's going to take you back to Hattiesburg. She's like, never going back to Hattiesburg. I said, you wait. When you let God have his full force work in your life, finish what he's going to do, at the end of the story, God's going to take you back to Hattiesburg. No, I'm never going back to Hattiesburg. Well, years went by, and she was in church every Sunday, listening to my dad, and then we started North Point. She came with us, and she was always at every service. She stayed for every service. She couldn't get enough. She would serve, and finally, she broke her addiction. I mean, she was clean, and that was you've been to AA meetings, I'm sure. I don't know if you've ever been to an NA meeting, Narcotics Anonymous, a CA meeting, Cocaine Anonymous. I've been to all of them, okay? Smoke-filled room. I'm like, I'm going to have cancer by the time that AA meeting's over. I mean, I met rock stars. I met people I didn't even know lived in Atlanta. I was immersed, and I went to her first meeting. She went to the CA, the Cocaine Anonymous meeting. She didn't do cocaine, but that was the closest thing to her addiction. She felt like she could relate mostly to those people. And there I am in the basement of some church somewhere in downtown Atlanta, smoke-filled room with, freaky cocaine people coming off of that, and it was precious people. I mean, you just couldn't be there and not be brokenhearted and cried. And I gave her chip. Ooh, it was so emotional. Then a few months later, I was there. I gave her next chip. Once she was clean for a while, she said, Andy, I want to start a ministry. I said, I knew this was going to happen. She said, I want to help women who are victims of abuse, especially, I won't go into detail. I just want to help women who are victims of abuse. I said, you'd be great at that.